Well, if the warnings are to be believed, Earth is facing the biggest mass extinction since the dinosaur age. Is Mars the only hope for humankind, and do we really have a chance of colonising the red planet? This is Roundtable with me, David Foster. Overpopulation and overconsumption. Scientists say our abuse of Earth will make it unfit for human life, possibly in just 100 years. It is a view that some dismiss as alarmist, but others are investigating Mars as an alternative place for human settlement. Well, finding a way for the red planet to sustain life is still in the early stages, and some question whether it's possible at all.
An era of biological annihilation. Some say planet Earth is entering a sixth mass extinction, that the future of humanity is at stake.
Allow me to be blunt. The world is in a mess.
But could the answer in fact be far, far away? Is colonizing Mars mankind's only hope? There are fears that one day planet Earth could be uninhabitable. Natural resources are being used up, the world is warming and oceans are rising. Stephen Hawking says mankind has just 100 years left to live on our planet.
The high end of the planet continues with a temperature of 250 degrees centigrade and radiant sulfuric acid.
But if the human race is facing extinction on Earth, with no new world to set sail to, is space now our only option? The lure of the red planet has captured the imagination of mankind for years. Colonizing Mars has been a recurring theme in the imaginations of sci-fi writers.
The storm had escalated to severe, and we had no choice but to abort the mission.
But yesterday's sci-fi writer is today's futurist. And they are shaping mankind's next steps. Among those with designs on getting Earthlings to Mars is billionaire Elon Musk. He wants to create a permanent, self-sustaining human presence on the planet.
I don't have an immediate doomsday prophecy, but eventually history suggests there will be some doomsday event. The alternative is to become a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species, which I hope you would agree that is the right way to go.
Next grand voyage for the human race is to leave the planet Earth and to go other places.
A single planet species is not going to survive long. Bad things can happen to a beautiful world like Earth.
Mars One says it'll be the first to establish a human colony on the red planet. They're planning one-way trips in around 15 years' time. More than 200,000 people have applied to make the journey. And US President Donald Trump also thinks Mars needs to be examined. Exploration of the planet is now part of NASA's long-term vision.
It advances space science by maintaining a balanced set of mission and activities to explore our solar system and the entire universe.
But creating life on Mars comes with its challenges. Toxic chemicals recently discovered on the planet's surface could wipe out all living organisms, making it much more hostile than previously thought. And there's the cost of getting to Mars. Billions will be spent in the quest to touch down on the planet, but Elon Musk wants the journey to cost as little as $200,000. But even if we could get to the red planet easily and affordably, could it ever support human life? If Stephen Hawking and others are right, could it be that mankind needs to become a multi-planetary species, or else face the possible threat of the end of humanity?
Just how realistic is the prospect of human life on Mars? What are the ethics of colonising another planet, and should we perhaps instead focus on trying to fix the problems down here? At today's Roundtable, Brian McDonald, physicist and an astronaut volunteer for the Mars One programme you've just heard about, which hopes to establish a colony on the planet. To my left, space scientist Simon Foster from Imperial College London, who says that colonising Mars is not the only option, and the writer and novelist Chibundu Onusu, who's written about the potential for colonising Mars and believes, however, that our efforts may be better spent improving life on Earth. Thank you very much for coming in for this round table. Ryan, as a man who hopes to spend his years and never come on Mars and never come back again, are we doing this because we have to, or because we just fancy it?
Well, in the long term, we do have to go to Mars. In fact, we have to go beyond the Earth. 99.9% of all species that have ever existed at one time on our planet have gone extinct. I personally don't think that we should go to Mars out of an argument of fear, though, about inevitability of something happening. I think we should go to Mars out of hope. Hope for that by going to Mars and inspiring children and young people by doing such an incredibly complicated task, that we can make life right here on the Earth better for everyone.
But are you suggesting it is the only hope of saving the planet?
I don't think it is. I think there's a lot of alarmist kind of news out there about the Earth is in trouble, but I think we can stop it and save it. I don't think that, you know, if you look at Mars, there's pictures behind us, there's no atmosphere, there's no magnetic field. We've got all that, and there's no water, as far as we know. We've got all that on Earth. We can, I personally believe, I'm an optimist, so we can fix these problems. I don't think Mars is the only option, but I would love to see people go there. If Ryan goes there,
well, we'll get back to the practicalities in just a moment. Chibundu, you've said, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you, that, you know, we need to fix this place rather than go somewhere else. But at the same time, we've got a problem of overpopulation, 7 billion at the moment, and going up.
Well, yes, of course. For me, it just seems a matter of common sense. You know, if a light is broken in your house, you don't say you're going to move into the garden and never live in your house anymore because the light is broken. You fix the broken lights in your house. And I think, yeah, going to Mars out of curiosity, but not because this is a solution to overpopulation or a solution to climate change or a solution to poverty. It doesn't make sense to me. It's
a red planet, a dusty old thing at the moment, and your T-shirt, Ryan, shows that on the left as I'm looking at it. But the image on the right is not of our planet Earth, but is of Mars as you hope or expect it to be one day.
Yes, so increasingly what we've learned from all the rover missions and satellites that we've sent to Mars is that Mars didn't always used to be just a boring red rock like it appears to be today. It used to have an atmosphere, it used to have lakes and oceans of liquid water. But since then it's gone downhill. But crucially, a lot of the ingredients that made the ancient Mars a habitable environment exist on Mars today. And this is why I would argue that if we're going anywhere beyond the Earth, Mars is the place to go, because we can transform Mars over many, many centuries. This would be an incredibly ambitious project, which we call the terraforming process, literally making an Earth. Mars is the only place we know of with current technology in the solar system that we could turn back into a habitable planet.
What do you think?
But we don't have to turn this habitable planet into a it's already habitable. We have to fix what we have.
I just don't see how we go. Part of the problem is, we talk about the atmosphere, but there's no magnetic field there, which is the big problem. So we've got a lovely magnetic, I keep saying lovely, but I love this planet.
Well, help us that don't understand that. Why is one absolutely wonderful and we need it, and the other doesn't have it, and that's the biggest problem?
Well, the big problem, you've probably seen the aurora. Now, this is where you've got these huge eruptions on the sun, and they're hitting the Earth.
The solar flares.
Yeah, and they're bouncing around the Earth, and they're causing the aurora. And the Earth's magnetic field is shielding us from that. Now, without a magnetic field, you're just open to that. That's going to strike the surface of the planet. Now, obviously, you may be able to get an atmosphere. I don't know how you're going to get around the problem of not having a magnetic field to protect us from that. The surface is just, we're continually being blasted with UV radiation, which makes it a real problem at the moment. So I can understand maybe living underground, but actually turning the clock back, I don't understand how we could do that.
It's an issue of timescales more than anything else. NASA's MAVEN spacecraft has measured that the current rate that Mars' atmosphere is being lost is about 100 grams per second. So, of course, if you created an Earth-like atmosphere on Mars and you left it for tens of millions of years, you would lose it. But it's an issue of geological timescales versus human timescales. We're trying to solve a 23rd century problem, namely, how would you restore the magnetic field of Mars, using technology that we don't have and we don't understand just yet.
But it's a question of resources, isn't it? Not just mineral resources. It's money.
It's money.
This is going to cost, here's one, more than $6 billion so far.
Doing this would cost around $1 trillion.
Okay, but so far you've only got over $1 million, so you're way off target at the moment. But it's priorities. What do you do with your money? Do governments pay for this? What would you think?
Well,
if
exactly.
They
so if you're a billionaire and you have billions of dollars to spare, like Elon Musk, fine, spend your money on Mars exploration. But to say that governments should project into the next 100 years. So, for example, governments are making climate change acts that are projecting into the next 100 years about how to reduce our consumption. This is where we should be putting our efforts into, not putting our efforts into trying to move populations to Mars.
But there's an argument, isn't there, that space exploration, or at least delving into the science of it, actually pushes humankind forward in terms of technologies. Is that a viable one for you?
Well, yes, this is true. Of course, space exploration has, so I was actually researching this, went on the NASA website, and kind of LED lights used in space have been used on Earth, for example. So many technologies have come out from it. But are you saying that you should halve your education budget or you should halve your welfare budget so that you can research on how to send people to Mars? Government is about priorities. So
should it be privately funded? I mean, you can spend your money if you earn it on whatever you like, I would think, but governments, should they get involved in that?
Well, as we were just saying, there is actually feedback, you know, into the economy from this. So I think people think that when money is just blown away in space, that's it, it just evaporates. A lot of material, you know, in health, actually, in your mobile phone, a lot of the technology there was actually developed for spacecraft.
In the UK, actually, we have a 6-to-1 return for all investment we put into space, from all the industrial contracts that are generated, technology offshoots. So that's why the government is actually increasing its investment in space. Because you're not blasting the money away, you're actually directly generating money.
We've talked about the whys, now let's talk about the hows, how it would be done. If you went to Mars, and you would be only one of 4 people if you were on the first mission in 2031, what would be the immediate problems you had to deal with? How would you go about living?
So we've already actually mentioned one of the really pressing immediate problems, which is the issue of UV and cosmic rays which are on the surface of Mars. So that means that you can't just go outside whenever you want. Obviously, you have to wear a spacesuit because we can't breathe the atmosphere on Mars. It's almost all carbon dioxide. But it means you actually have to limit how long you go outside to no more than about 8 hours a week or so to make sure that you don't get cancer from extreme radiation exposure. So you would actually have to bury your habitats partially underground with between about 1 and 5 meters of Martian soil if you really want to provide robust radiation shield.
You're not going to get that done in a week, are you?
Oh, no, you'd have to.
And if you're only allowed outside for 8 hours,
yeah,
so something would go before you to prepare all this. What about food? That's a problem, isn't it? I mean, I think you may be able to convert some of the materials into water, but growing food is supposed to be a big
I think from the Martian film, it's made out to look a lot easier than it is. You just get some soil, plant some potato scraps and your kind of waste product, so to speak, and you grow potatoes and it's all fine. There was some research recently that you probably saw, Ryan, in that there's actually the fear that the UV radiation is making the soil like impossible to grow in. So it's like there's some chemical compounds that are being formed that actually make living organisms in the soil, you know, it's just terrible for it.
The argument was that perchlorates interact with ultraviolet radiation, produce some kind of chloride ions that are then destructive to bacteria.
We're not scientists, you know. Let's talk about the ethics. Let's talk about the morals.
Sorry.
I just think people have been reading too many science fiction books and watching too many sci-fi movies to think that moving to Mars is the solution for problems on Earth today.
I kind of feel that I'm in between both of you. I'm kind of, because I'm stuck. I think obviously being like an Earth scientist, you know, well, a solar physicist looking at climate change, I see it as that thing at like that point. But I'm with Ryan in that weirdly, my inspiration came from astronauts, from Helen Sharman. You know, that's what and there is a huge dividend in that young men and women are actually driven into science by these huge undertakings. You know, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, then you had the European astronauts and hopefully Ryan.
But they're also driven into other things by dreams and inspirational people. I mean, the children know about you as a novelist, Nigerian novelist. They take their inspiration from there as well. It doesn't have to be from science projects. Eh?
No, but I think actually seeing someone physically do something has a huge kind of impact upon their body. Instead of just reading about it, actually physically seeing it, imagining seeing you, someone like my father went outside and looked to the moon. He couldn't see people, but he's understand what people were there.
So, Chibano, what do we tell children?
So I'm not saying cancel space programs. So for example, I watched Hidden Figures, and it was a movie about how black women contributed to the American space program. And that was great if it gets children interested in science. But again, I think, so a problem I had with the whole space exploration was describing going to Mars as a leap for mankind, and that overarching language. And you think about all the people that have been left behind since the last leap for mankind when we went to the moon, kind of projecting science as this thing that will fix our ills instead of looking...
Let me ask you guys, as the scientists, what are the benefits of going there?
So there will be many direct technological spin-offs. So we've already talked about some. For instance, if we really want to help address issues like climate change right here on the Earth, we need more investment going into renewable energy technologies. And solar panels were really perfected by you needed to have a source of reliable electricity in space, in orbit, for things like the International Space Station. Spin-offs like that will directly come from Mars. So you'll never be shipping resources from Mars to the Earth, at least in this century. But the biggest export from Mars will be the ideas which will be generated there. In learning to solve the unique problems on Mars, I personally think that will help us solve many of the huge problems which are absolutely real and we need to deal with here on the Earth. I'm not arguing we should neglect the Earth in favour of Mars.
Well, one of my, sorry, it's a slight sideways step, but in the, actually by going
sideways
to Mars...
step for mankind.
Well, yeah, I would say on the way, weirdly, that there's NASA performing something called the Asteroid Redirect Mission. And one of their kind of ideas is to start landing on asteroids to look at mining them for resources that we don't actually have here on Earth. Now, that's a kind of sidestep from Mars, but actually going out there to Mars, actually, I possibly won't be able to mine there, but the ideas of landing on it and perfecting the exploration will actually help us go to these asteroids and take actually precious resources, rare materials that we might not find on Earth that we could actually exploit. So there is that aspect to it, actually, that perfecting landing on a large planet would actually help us actually landing on these small objects. And also there is the idea that there has been mass extinction that Ryan has said before. Some of them have been by asteroids. Now, the idea of actually having a space-ready program that should one of these be coming towards
Only the dinosaurs had a space
program.
But
can I just ask you, ignoring this gentleman for just a moment, to talk about him, do either of you think he's actually going to go? Chibano?
I think it's unlikely.
Sam?
I say possibly. I would say I would really like Ryan to go, because I honestly would take huge inspiration from it. I think obviously the problem we've got is we're in an era of austerity and the money is the problem. Now, this would have been ambitious when things pre-2008, when everything was great. Well, not everything was great. No, I know, exactly. There are problems, but, you know, they're not in a time now where we have pressing issues around the world because of there's been this global financial crisis. There is a problem with that.
But talking about him as an object rather than as a person, and I apologise for this, do you think he's going to fry the first week he's there?
I don't think that is. My issue is, and I hate to say it, right, is actually getting there and actually coping with the radiation on the way. That's, for me, is the big problem, because as I said before, sorry, it's been a solar physics, talk about the sun. There are these solar flares you mentioned, these huge explosions. They can hit the Earth and cause the aurora. What do you do? And this is actually a question I did want to ask. Right, I've spoke to people at Imperial College where I work, engineers working on this. We don't really have a solution. What happens if one of these, because it's, say, a 6 to 8 month journey?
Yeah, most likely two coronal mass ejections would take place on the journey. So the simplest idea that we have at the moment...
These massive flares from the sun.
And they can be fatal.
Yes, absolutely. So the simplest idea we have at the moment would actually be to have a radiation shelter which is effectively a hollowed-out water tank. Because obviously water, having hydrogen, is very efficient at mopping up all those protons that fly in from the sun and can damage our DNA. So there are other proposed solutions which are just experimental and we haven't tried, like having a magnetic field generator. But if you want the simplest possible design, just water tanks on the exterior would be a good way to deal with coronal mass ejections.
Okay, we're talking about a program that is going to cost Mars One, at least it's projected by the people in charge of it themselves, $6 billion.
Yes.
They've only got $1 million so far and a promise of another $6 million. Do you really think it's going to happen, that one day you're going to sit in your spacesuit and say bye-bye to the Earth?
I wouldn't be surprised if there are further delays in the program. When Mars One originally created their program, they were hoping to go in 2023, and of course now it's 2031. But I don't see obvious technology problems as delaying the program overly. It's all rooted in the finances. And you're absolutely right, it's an incredibly challenging endeavor, and to raise the finances is even more challenging. So at the moment, they're just funding technology design studies to prove that it can actually happen and to get the astronaut selection process and training started. Whether they'll be able to raise all the money remains to be seen, but they're doing all the right incremental steps to prove that it can be done.
But what about the challenges of raising finances for what may be a suicide mission, for what may end in death?
Well, I wouldn't. Well, life is a one-way trip. It doesn't matter what planet you're on. You still grow old and die at one point. And if you're on Mars and you have an entirely organically grown diet, recycled air all the time, life expectancy could be 10 years longer. So in which case, people on Earth are on a
expensive
suicide
way to
mission.
die is a quote I took down from a well-known scientist. It is that, really, isn't it?
Sorry, can you repeat?
An expensive way to die.
Oh, yes. At least initially, we have to get the cost down in order for it to be feasible in the long term. We heard earlier that Elon Musk wants to get the cost down to $200,000 or so.
Well, it's not a snip exactly, is it? I mean, for an individual. What about the ethics of colonisation? Chibunda, I mean, we've seen that over the centuries. What about colonising somewhere else? Is there something sort of rather distasteful about that?
Well, I don't think there are any Africans or Indians or Chinese people on Mars. So it's not exactly the same type of colonization, unless.
But it's not only the people who've been exploited; it's resources as well. You know, I mean, and then there's the idea of sort of going somewhere there and just taking it over. You don't see a problem with that?
I guess I haven't even gotten that far in my thought process about Mars. All I think is going to Mars is not a viable solution to fixing.
Well, let me ask you this. You're a novelist. You're somebody who trades on the imagination. If one day Ryan is in his spacesuit sitting on the launch pad and he goes off, will you be excited or will you be disappointed?
Of course, I'll be excited. I'll watch it on TV. I'll tweet about it. But will I think, wow, my children might live on Mars one day? No, I think we have issues here on Earth we have to focus on. Okay,
practical things. We were talking just before we went on air with this about an item I'd read about the Chinese perhaps having teleported something, a proton, into space. Well, you said it's sort of like that, but not exactly that. Now, the idea of teleportation is something that's been around in space movies forever and ever and ever. Do we not have to wait until we can find ourselves a way of getting across the galaxy much, much more quickly than getting in a spaceship and taking 3 months to get somewhere that we can't even live on?
Took a very deep breath. I think there's a lot of issues surrounding that. As I say, I think the idea of teleportation is a bit of a red herring. The idea is also you entangle two things, and then you have to still send one of those objects to the place you want to go. So when you've so they've entangled two photons, like two pieces of light, you can imagine. But that still has to be placed on board the spaceship. So you still have to send something physically to Mars.
But closer than we were at one point, and it might happen one day. Isn't it better to wait until we see what's further out?
Well, there'd be an easier solution than quantum teleportation, which is centuries away for doing large collections of atoms. Send a 3D printer to Mars, and then just get the 3D printer to use local materials to print things. That's almost like teleporting. You key in what you want, press send, and then a spanner appears on Mars. We already do this on the International Space Station, so this is not science fiction. We know how to do it right now.
And I think also saying that you're going to wait for the next technological advance means you're always waiting, because then by the time that comes along, you go, well, this is safer, so we'll wait for that, and you never go. And I think actually saying about, you know, exploiting the planet, I actually do feel there's something in humanity that we need to explore. I know it sounds very Star Trek-y, but there is something in us that we need to keep going. And it's a bit like a shark, that if it stops swimming, it dies. And I think there is an aspect to humans, if we stop exploring, we stop searching.
Chibundo, isn't the essence of being human being on this planet. This is our home. This is where we smell things, see things, hear things, imagine things. That's what makes us human, and we wouldn't be the same if we went somewhere else.
I think I love the idea of a pioneering spirit, but my point is we haven't pioneered enough here on Earth. We haven't finished the frontiers that are here on Earth. I'm not saying that we shouldn't go to space. I'm saying we also need to look at the problems that are here and not treat space as this sort of escapist place, this sort of afterlife, that when we've drained this planet, then we go off to space to drain another one.
No, all that I would advocate for is absolutely we should spend the vast majority of our resources right here trying to solve the problems here on the Earth. But what about 0.1% of GDP of the planet? Is that worth it for inspiring young people with the impossible to create a new frontier and to develop new technologies that could directly help us?
Do you know what? We all agree.
I know,
So I tell you what, that is the time to draw a line under this discussion. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Indeed, it is still science fiction at the moment, but one day it may well be the new frontier. And the possibility that it could support life will keep many of us, humankind, on the path towards reaching it. We shall see. That was Roundtable with me, David Foster. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.